Seattle. A rainy afternoon. Sienna Blake stood behind the counter of the Cedar Cup, a small neighborhood cafe tucked between a yoga studio and a bookstore. The rain outside drummed steadily against the windows. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and a faint lavender tattoo peeked out just above her wrist. She was halfway through wiping down the espresso machine when the shop phone rang. Cedar Cup Coffee. She answered, her voice slightly raspy from the cold. Hi, I am trying to confirm this is the babysitting service, right? I need someone urgently. My son is sick. I am stuck at the animal hospital and... The voice on the other end was male anxious. Sienna blinked. Sorry. You have the wrong number. This is a coffee shop, not a childcare service. There was a pause. Then the voice sighed heavier than just embarrassment. I must have called an old contact. Sorry, I just needed someone. He has a fever. 5 years old. I should not have left him, but I had no choice. Something in his voice, not desperation, but something softer, more human, made her hesitate. She looked around the empty cafe. Where are you? She asked. 15 minutes later, apartment building near Green Lake. The door opened on the second knock. A tall man in scrubs stood there, soaked from the rain, with worry etched deep into his face. His name tag still clung to his chest. Dr. Drew Callahan, DVM. I am really sorry, he said quickly. My son is in the back room. He has a fever of 102. I left everything on the kitchen counter, his meds, the thermometer, my number. I have a surgery starting in 10 minutes, and no one else picked up. I know this is crazy. Sienna looked at him. I make coffee for a living. You called the wrong number. Drew paused. His eyes were tired. Yes. And somehow, the wrong number brought the right person. They stood there in silence. No explanation, no plan. Only a man who needed someone to trust, and a woman who, for reasons she did not fully understand, said yes. Inside the bedroom, dim lights. Fevered child. Sienna knelt by the side of the bed where a small boy lay under a faded dinosaur blanket. His cheeks were flushed, his breathing shallow. Hey, she whispered. What is your name, Evan? The boy murmured. You like superheroes, Evan? He gave a tiny nod. Spider-Man. Sienna smiled. Perfect. Want to hear about the time Spider-Man was afraid of heights? By the end of the story, Evan had drifted off his body, less tense, a small smile on his lips. 2 hours later, Drew returned. The apartment was quiet. Sienna sat in the kitchen with a mug of chamomile tea she had made from a dusty tin in the cabinet. Evan was sleeping peacefully. Drew stepped in, removing his wet jacket, his shoulders finally lowering a little. I do not know how to thank you, he said. You could give me free dog checkups for life, she joked. They both laughed. It surprised them. At the door, Who were you actually trying to call? She asked as she grabbed her coat. He looked away. A babysitter we used to have. She moved away. I never deleted the number. And me? A complete mistake, Drew said. But Evan has not fallen asleep that calmly in weeks. Sienna nodded, but said nothing. She stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed, she realized her heart was still pounding. She did not know what any of it meant. Only that something about that apartment, about the boy, and about Drew had reached a part of her she thought had gone quiet. 2 days later, Sienna had not planned to see them again. She told herself it was just a one-time thing. A strange moment. A wrong number. A child with a fever. But for some reason, as she was placing blueberry muffins into the pastry case Tuesday morning, her thoughts kept circling back to the apartment on Green Lake. Back to Evan's small hand clutching her fingers. Back to Drew's tired eyes. And the way his shoulders dropped the moment he saw his son sleeping. She was halfway through restocking the milk fridge when the cafe door opened. Drew. He looked out of place not because he wore a dark green hoodie and jeans instead of scrubs, but because he seemed unsure of his own presence. "Hi," he said, voice hesitant. "I hope this isn't inappropriate. Evan's asking for you." Sienna blinked. "He remembers. He told me this morning that Spider-Man sleeps better when you're around." She laughed quietly, but honestly. That's a lot of pressure to live up to. Drew gave a small smile. "We're still figuring things out, but if you're not busy today, I'd really appreciate it. Just for a bit." She paused, looked out at the drizzle misting the sidewalk. Then she untied her apron, back at the apartment. Evan was already up, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, with mismatched socks and a juice box. He lit up the moment he saw her. "You came back?" He beamed. "I brought muffins," she said, holding up a paper bag. "You are my favorite spider-sitter," he declared. Drew chuckled from the kitchen. "Apparently, we're naming things now." Sienna joined Evan on the couch. She read him a story about a raccoon who was afraid of the dark. Halfway through, he fell asleep again, his head resting lightly on her lap. She looked over at Drew. He had stopped pretending to check emails and was watching quietly from the kitchen doorway. "Is he always this easy with strangers?" she asked. "No," Drew said. "He usually keeps to himself, especially since—" He trailed off. Sienna didn't press. Later, in the quiet of early evening, Sienna sat on the apartment balcony while Evan napped a mug of lukewarm coffee in her hands. Drew joined her, handing her a sweatshirt. "It gets colder than you'd think out here," he said. She pulled it over her arms and smiled. It smelled like cedar and something warm, maybe laundry detergent and long days. "I'm sorry I just showed up again," he said. "I'm not great at asking for help, not since, well, everything." "You didn't ask," she said simply. "You just gave me a reason to come." He looked at her, really looked for the first time. You're not just good with him. There's something about you. He feels safe. I don't know what that means yet, but I know it matters. Sienna's throat tightened. She had not felt like she mattered in a long time. On her way out, as she picked up her coat, Evan stirred and mumbled half asleep. You can come back tomorrow, right? Sienna looked to Drew. He didn't answer, but his expression said everything. I'll try, she said softly. If the cafe lets me. Evan nodded and smiled, drifting back to sleep. Drew walked her to the elevator. The hallway was quiet, dimly lit. Before the doors opened, he touched her arm just lightly, just enough. Thank you, Sienna, for showing up. Twice. She looked up at him. I think I needed this as much as you did. As the elevator doors closed, neither of them smiled. But something small, something certain, had shifted between them. Another Thursday, a quieter cafe. Sienna was wiping down a corner table when her coworker Maya peeked out from behind the espresso machine. You've got a visitor, she said with a smirk. Sienna turned. Drew stood by the doorway holding a small paper bag and looking unsure of whether he should have come in. You're not working today, are you? He asked. Technically, yes. Emotionally, maybe not, she said, dropping the cloth into the sanitizer bucket. He held out the bag. Chocolate croissants, bribery. Sienna raised an eyebrow. That might work. They walked to Green Lake. The path around the lake was slick from morning rain. Ducks floated lazily on the water. Evan skipped ahead with a small stick, pretending to be a knight. Sienna and Drew followed behind. You ever get tired, she asked, of being the one holding everything together? Drew paused. Yes, every day. But if I fall apart, who's left? She nodded. He glanced at her. What about you? Sienna hesitated. I stopped letting things fall a long time ago. Once they did, I didn't know how to put them back. He wanted to ask more, but she looked ahead again, gaze fixed on Evan. Later back at the apartment, Evan was watching cartoons with his legs swinging off the couch. Sienna sat at the kitchen counter, swirling tea in her mug. Drew leaned back in his chair, watching her. You're good with him, he said. You keep saying that. Because it's true. You have this way of making things feel still. Sienna looked down. Years ago, she said slowly, I was working toward becoming a child therapist. I had a practicum placement, real kids, real families. Drew stayed quiet. There was a boy, sensitive, quiet. He reminded me of Evan in some ways. I missed something, a sign, maybe a shift. I thought he was okay. A week later, his mom pulled him from the program. I never found out exactly what happened. But after that, I couldn't walk back into the classroom. I kept wondering if I had failed him somehow. She set the mug down, her voice low. And the worst part, No one blamed me, which made it worse. Because I still did. Drew did not offer a solution. He didn't say she had done her best. He just sat there, letting her words settle in the space between them. You walked away, he said finally, but you didn't lose the part of you that could still help people. Sienna blinked fast. Maybe, but it's different now. It doesn't feel different to Evan, Drew said quietly. That evening, a soft goodbye. I should get back, Sienna said as the sun faded. The shop's short-staffed in the morning. Drew walked her to the elevator again. They had developed a rhythm, now the same hallway, the same few seconds before the doors opened. But this time, Sienna spoke first. You're not afraid, are you? Of what? Of someone like me getting close? Nick. He looked at her serious now. I am. But I think I'm more afraid of letting someone stay and losing them. The elevator dinged. Sienna stepped inside, but this time she didn't let the doors close just yet. Then maybe, don't decide that for both of us. That night, back at her apartment, Sienna sat at her small kitchen table, Evan's drawing in front of her, a crayon picture of her with a cape labeled Sienna the Brave. She was not brave, not really. But maybe, just maybe, she was ready to try again. 1 week later, Sienna had become part of their rhythm. Not officially. She was not on payroll, not a nanny, not even a family friend, but she was there. She walked Evan to school once, made soup when he caught a cold, helped him paint a dragon with way too many legs. She also started leaving little notes in his lunchbox, not every day, just when she felt like it. Notes that said things like, "You're stronger than you think, and real knights take naps." Drew never said anything about the notes. But once she saw him quietly tuck one into his wallet after Evan showed it off. It was a Sunday afternoon. The three of them were at the botanical garden. Evan ran ahead, chasing butterflies between hedges. Sienna held a small bag of snacks. Drew walked beside her, a half-smile playing on his lips. You know, he said my mom would say this is dangerous. What flowers, letting someone like you into Evan's life? She stopped walking. Someone like me? He hesitated. Someone kind, steady. Who might not stay? The words hit too quickly, too hard. Then maybe, don't let me in halfway, she said softly. Either open the door or lock it. But stop leaving it ajar. That night, things were quiet. Too quiet. Evan had gone to bed early. Drew stood in the kitchen, pouring water into a glass. Sienna sat on the couch, a half-finished book in her lap. Neither spoke. Finally, Drew said, I haven't let anyone pass that door in years. I know, she replied. And I didn't mean to let you in, you just walked through. Sienna closed the book. Maybe that's the only way it works. You don't plan it. It just happens. He turned to face her. But if Evan gets too attached, and you... She cut in. You're not just afraid for him. You're afraid for yourself. The silence that followed was the kind that did not need to be explained. He did not deny it. She stood, picked up her coat. I wasn't looking for this, Drew, she said. But it found me. You found me. He didn't say a word. I need to know if I belong in this story, or if I'm just a chapter you're scared to turn. Still no answer. Sienna gave a small, sad smile. You don't have to say it. I already know. She left. And this time the elevator doors closed before he could stop her. The next morning, Evan woke up and searched the kitchen. Her shoes were not there. No lunchbox note waited. His lip trembled. Is she gone? Drew knelt beside him. She left because I couldn't say what I should have. Was it me? Evan asked, voice small. No, Drew said, holding him close. It was me. In the quiet that followed. Drew kept moving. Work, dishes, school drop-offs. He told himself they were fine. But every time Evan sat quietly staring at the door, waiting, a part of Drew cracked. He had tried to build a life that was safe, predictable, untouched by grief. But he had forgotten that walls don't protect love, they starve it. 3 days later, the apartment had grown too quiet. Evan had stopped asking about her, but that silence only made things worse. Drew stood by the kitchen sink, holding a crumpled drawing in his hand, a picture of a woman with a cape stick figure arms reaching out to a smaller boy. In the corner, the words were scribbled in shaky letters. Come back soon, spider sitter. He finally admitted it. He had made a mistake. Not just in letting her leave, but in pretending that her presence was temporary. He did something he hadn't done since she walked out. He called the cafe. Cedar Cup. This is Maya. Hi, Drew said. I'm trying to reach Sienna Blake. There was a pause. She's not here. Do you know where she went? Another pause, this one longer. Then Maya's voice lowered. I shouldn't really say, but she volunteers at a center near the university. Juniper House. She helps with the Community Kids program. Maybe try there. That evening, Drew stood in front of a brick building with murals of trees and stars painted on the walls. The sign read, Juniper House, Safe Spaces for Young Minds. He stepped inside. Laughter echoed from a room down the hall, a reading circle, colorful cushions, markers everywhere. And in the middle, Sienna. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid. A little girl leaned against her shoulder while Sienna read from a picture book, voice animated, eyes alive. She looked like herself, or maybe like someone she had almost forgotten how to be. Drew didn't move, just watched. When the session ended, she rose to help a boy zip up his jacket. She turned toward the doorway, and their eyes met. She stopped. So did he. Outside near the street. I'm not here to ask you to come back, Drew said, hands in his coat pockets. Then why are you here? Her voice was calm, guarded. To say thank you for what you gave Evan, for what you gave me. Sienna looked away. You made it clear you weren't ready, she said. I wasn't, he admitted. But losing you made me realize something. I might never be ready if I keep waiting to not be afraid. She said nothing for a moment. Then softly, fear is real. But so is what we had. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. A child's bracelet made of lopsided beads. In the center, IENNA. Evan made this the night you left. He hid it under his pillow. I found it this morning. Sienna stared at it, her fingers trembling. He misses you, Drew said quietly. We both do. Her eyes filled, but she did not step forward yet. And I miss you, she whispered. Something shifted. Not because of grand gestures, not because anything was fixed, but because something broken had been named. The next morning, Sienna stood in Drew's kitchen again. Everything looked the same. The fridge still had a magnet that read, "Don't forget to feed the fish." They had no fish. Evan's drawings still lined the hallway walls. But somehow, everything felt softer. As if silence no longer meant absence. Evan sat cross-legged at the kitchen table, carefully threading beads onto a string. He looked up when she entered and grinned wide. You came back. I said I would, she smiled. He held up the bracelet. This one's for you. But don't lose it this time. Drew met her eyes across the counter. She nodded. I'll keep it close. A few days passed, then a few more. They didn't make a plan. Sienna came in the mornings before her volunteer shift. Sometimes helped Evan with reading. Sometimes just sat on the couch while he played with blocks. And Drew finished emails. Drew didn't call it anything. Neither did she. But Evan started drawing 3 people in all his pictures. Not 2. 3. One afternoon, as golden light warmed the living room, Drew sat beside Sienna while Evan napped in his room. I don't know how you found your way back here, he said. But I keep thinking about how easily I could have missed it. That night I called. I didn't even mean to. You didn't? She smiled. Wrong number, remember? He shook his head. No, right person. A long pause. Then he asked what he hadn't asked before. You said something happened years ago with a kid. You blamed yourself. But there's something else, isn't there? Sienna looked down at the bracelet Evan had made for her. She twisted it gently around her fingers. His name was Noah, she said quietly. He was the reason I chose to study child therapy. He wasn't just a student. He was my foster brother. Drew's breath caught. I never told anyone that before, she continued. He was placed with my family when I was 17. He had nightmares, wouldn't speak for weeks, but slowly, he opened up to me. I used to read to him every night. She swallowed hard. When he left to go back to his birth mom, I thought I'd be okay. But I wasn't. I missed him like a limb I didn't know I'd grown. I still think about him. Where he is now, whether he ever sleeps through the night. Drew didn't interrupt, just listened. Sienna's voice grew soft. That's why I couldn't go back to school, not because I failed a patient, but because I gave my heart to a child I wasn't allowed to keep. And I didn't know how to do that again. Drew reached for her hand. You did it again, Sienna, with Evan, and somehow it saved both of us. Her eyes filled, but this time she didn't look away. Saturday morning, the kind with pancakes. Evan sat at the table legs, swinging, as he arranged banana slices into the shape of a smiley face on his plate. Across the kitchen, Sienna flipped pancakes, while Drew tried and failed to make coffee without the filter collapsing. You are both kind of a mess, Evan announced cheerfully. Sienna raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? He shrugged. But like, the nice kind, Drew muttered. Thanks for the vote of confidence, and handed Sienna a mug of unevenly brewed coffee. Is this punishment? She asked, taking a sip. It's character building, he said. They both laughed, and for a moment, just a moment, the kitchen felt like a place they had lived in for years. Later that afternoon, in the park, they had spread out a blanket beneath a maple tree, the kind that hadn't turned yet, but would soon. Sienna sat reading a picture book aloud. Evan curled against her side thumb in his mouth, eyes heavy with sleep. Drew watched from across the blanket, heart twisting with something he couldn't name. Not love exactly. Not yet. Something quieter. Like a promise whispered before it could be broken. Then Evan said, almost sleepily, "Can Sienna stay forever?" The words dropped like a stone into water, not heavy, but certain. Sienna froze. Drew sat up straighter, unsure if he should speak. Evan turned, blinking up at her. I mean, you already live in our house part-time. Sienna smiled gently, brushing his hair aside. That's a very big question. Evan nodded. But I asked it anyway. That evening. Sienna stood at the door, coat in hand, unsure if she should leave. Drew joined her, one hand resting against the frame. You don't have to go. I know. He studied her. I'm not asking you to move in or to be something you're not ready to be. I don't want this to feel temporary anymore. Sienna looked at him, truly looked, and saw the fear was still there. But so was something else. Hope. She stayed that night. Not in the guest room, not as a visitor. She stayed because it felt right. They watched a movie after Evan fell asleep. They didn't hold hands. They didn't kiss. But Drew leaned his head against the back of the couch, And when Sienna rested hers beside it, they stayed that way until the credits rolled. Weeks passed, but it was no longer a story about waiting. It was about choosing. Mornings with cereal and mismatched socks. Afternoons at Juniper House. Evenings with quiet laughter and folded laundry. There was no announcement, no definition, just a rhythm. And then one Thursday evening, Drew asked the simplest thing. Would you have dinner with just me? No, Evan, she teased. He smiled. No cartoons, no booster seats, just you and me. As two people, not as a maybe. She nodded. I'd like that. Friday evening, Drew's apartment. Sienna stood in the doorway, unsure whether to knock or just walk in. She wore a soft navy dress, simple but beautiful, and a gold chain she hadn't worn in years. It wasn't a date outfit, but it wasn't not one either. Drew opened the door wearing a clean button-down shirt, sleeves rolled collar, slightly crooked, like he'd fussed with it too much. I burned the bread, he said immediately. I brought backup, Sienna replied, holding up a small bag from the bakery 2 blocks down. They both smiled, nervous but honest. Inside the table was set. 2 plates, 1 candle, no toys, no cartoons. Just quiet music playing in the background and the sound of Evan snoring softly in the next room. They ate slowly. Talked about little things, the new mural at Juniper House, Evan's obsession with cereal combinations, how Drew once adopted a turtle because Evan thought it looked serious. When the plates were mostly empty, Drew reached into his pocket. I found this yesterday, he said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. It was one of the notes Sienna had tucked into Evan's lunch weeks ago. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you still show up. I think you wrote this for him, Drew said. But I've been reading it like it was for me. Sienna didn't speak. She just looked at him, waiting. Then carefully Drew took her hand. I'm not asking for forever, he said. Not tonight. But I'm asking you to say yes to this. To pancakes, to movie nights, to clutter, to trying. Sienna's eyes shimmered. You're not the only one who's scared, she whispered. I don't want perfect, he said softly. I just want real. She nodded. Then yes. Yes to now. Later on the balcony, the city lights blinked beneath them. Sienna leaned into Drew's shoulder, her hands curled around a warm mug of tea. She's watching, you know, Drew said. Sienna looked up. My wife, wherever she is. I used to think moving forward meant letting her go. But I think now it just means I finally let someone else in. Sienna nodded. You're not replacing her. You're growing from where she left off. He reached into his pocket one more time. This time it wasn't a drawing or a note. It was a small ring. Simple. A thin gold band with a sunflower etched into the side. She used to love sunflowers, Drew said. And Evan thinks they're magic now. I'm not ready for forever, Sienna whispered, unsure. I'm not asking for forever, Drew said again. I'm asking for tomorrow. And the day after. One by one. She looked down at the ring. Then slowly, she slipped it onto her finger. 1 year later, the backyard of a small brick townhouse in North Seattle was filled with the scent of lavender and fresh rain. Mason jars held tea lights and paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. Nothing grand, just a few close friends, a soft playlist humming in the background, and a little boy holding a sunflower bigger than his head. Evan. He wore a bow tie, slightly too large for him, and a big grin. She's coming, he whispered loudly to Drew. And then Sienna appeared. A soft ivory dress, hair curled loosely over her shoulders. In her hands, a small bouquet of yellow and white wildflowers. Nothing borrowed, nothing blue, just her. When she reached Drew under the arbor, his sister had built from reclaimed wood. She smiled and said quietly, I never expected to find home in the middle of someone else's storm. But you were the calm I didn't know I needed. Drew took both her hands in his. You walked into my life by accident. But loving you, that was the most intentional thing I've ever done. Beside them, Evan held the ring with both hands as if it were the most important object in the world. When the officiant said, You may now kiss, Evan shouted. Wait, I'm supposed to throw the petals. Everyone laughed. He flung them upward, most missing their mark. But Sienna and Drew didn't care. Their kiss was quiet, full, real. Afterward, there were cupcakes and dancing. Evan insisted on the first dance one with both of them. Sienna whispered something in his ear. He giggled and whispered something back. Later, Drew and Sienna sat together under the string lights, hands entwined. You remember the night we met? He asked. You mean when you called a coffee shop instead of a sitter? He laughed. Yeah, that. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Best wrong number of your life. He kissed the top of her head. Best thing that ever happened to me. Full stop. A month later. The corner window of a cozy storefront now read, The Sunflower Space Books. Storytime community inside Sienna read aloud to a circle of children while Evan colored beside her. On the wall behind them was a framed drawing. 3 stick figures. One with a cape, one with glasses, one with a big sunflower head. Underneath it said, This is our family. Drew entered quietly, coffee in hand. He stood by the doorway for a moment, watching them, the 2 people who turned his world from silent to full. And as Sienna looked up and smiled, he smiled back. Because sometimes the people who arrive by accident are the ones who were always meant to stay.